Hi, and welcome to this year's Exam Revision Junior Cycle Home Economics Tips and Predictions for 2025. The plan for this video includes looking at the layout of the 2025 exam, tips for the Junior Cycle Home Ec exam, probable topics for the 2025 exam, and a quick tour of the Exam Revision platform. And what must be reminded is, whilst there is common topics that come up from year to year, we cannot fully guarantee whether these topics are going to come up this year. Junior Cycle Home Ec 2025 has no changes to the paper. At this stage, you will have completed CBA 1 in second year, CBA 2 in third year, and you will have completed your cooking exam prior to Easter in third year. So at this stage, all that's remaining is your 90-minute exam, and there is no changes to the structure of the paper for the 2025 paper. The layout of the junior cycle written exam. So we've had 3 past exam questions. You should be focusing your study on completing all of these past exam questions. Even if you've already completed them, you should do them again and correct yourself. The paper is common level and it is worth 320 marks for a 90-minute exam. So the remainder of your marks will have come from your 90-minute cooking exam prior to Easter. So there's 2 sections to the written paper, Section A and Section B. So Section A is commonly known as the short questions and Section B is your long questions. Section A contains 80 marks. There's 10 questions. You should spend around 20 minutes in total. So that's an average of 2 minutes per question. If you're spending any more than 20 minutes, you should move on to the long questions and then come back and finish off your Section A questions. Section B, or your long questions, is worth the most amount of marks at 240 marks. There are 3 questions. You should spend on average 60 minutes in total for this section of the paper, so that's approximately 20 minutes per question. If you found during your mocks that you were running out of time, I would suggest starting on your Section B long questions first, as these are worth more marks than your Section A ones, and then move on to your Section A at the end. Now you'll see here that altogether there is only 80 minutes allotted here. So now if I move on to here, it gives you a time plan. So my best advice is put your exam number on the paper, put your date of birth, and then what you need to do is read over all the questions. And the reason why this is important is so that your subconscious is starting to think about all the questions that are going to be coming up. So what some students like to do is they like to write down little stuff beside the questions as they're first glancing over them, and that helps them to remember it. So if it's a topic that you find particularly challenging and you've learned off stuff just prior to the exam, you can write that on the paper as you're getting started. Figure out what questions are coming up. Some of them will be more easier for you than others, and it will get you thinking about what's coming up. Spend 20 minutes doing Section A, 60 minutes doing Section B, and then at the end, it's really important that you spend at least 5 minutes reviewing your answers. A lot of students have a tendency to just hand up the exam and not look back, but sometimes students can accidentally skip a question, or sometimes a question that you didn't know the answer to earlier on in the exam might come into your mind, and then you'll be able to answer the question. What's really important is that you should never leave blanks, especially at the beginning in your short questions where we have multiple choice questions, because those questions you have a 1 in 3 chance of getting at least one part correct, and they're generally true and false, so that's a 50% chance of getting it right. So always attempt those style of questions, because otherwise it's just silly marks lost. So most importantly, read over your questions, because with the stress of exams, sometimes we can skip over questions. And it's also important that if you've used the additional paper at the back, that you make sure that everything is labelled, and this gives you the opportunity to just check that you've labelled everything correctly. So this is the time plan that I would recommend to students. And as I said earlier on, if you find that you're the type of student that's going to be stuck for time, focus on the long questions first, because as we can see, it's going to be worth worth the most amount of marks. So moving on now to your exam tips. So we know that we have three past exam papers with questions. We also have a sample paper from the SEC and we have an NCCA sample paper. So that gives us 5 whole exam papers that you should be able to answer. Answer them with your study notes in front of you and correct them, and then try and answer them again without your study notes, and this will allow you to see how much you know in a kind of as if you're testing yourself. So it's really important, and your teacher will have emphasized this across all subjects, that you only answer in blue or black pens. And the reason being is because your examiners will correct your exams in red. And it's also because all the exam papers now, the answers get scanned, they're all digitized, and they only pick up blue or black markers. Don't use the friction rub out pens because due to the friction of the papers, they can actually rub off parts of your answer, and we don't want that. So just use a traditional ballpoint pen. If you do need to use pencil, only use it for sketches. So for example, what's come up in the last 3 years is on your last long question where they've asked you to upcycle something. So it could be a t-shirt, it could be a shirt, and you need to be able to change certain things in it. So you can use a pencil in that case, as long as it's not a very light pencil. Booklet, as I said, is scanned, so don't write outside the boxes, and make sure that you're only writing in blue or black pen. My advice is bring more than one blue pen to the exam in case it runs out. There is extra paper at the back of the booklet. Make sure that if you are writing in these, that you label them correctly. So for example, if I'm on question 2 and I realize I've run out of space, what I would suggest is you put a little star beside it and say, I have continued to write this answer on page 14, and then the examiner will go to page 14, it will say question 2 continuation, and it's easier for the examiner, but also it's easier for you. So when you're spending those last 5 minutes reviewing your answers, it means you know exactly where the end of that answer is, and you can go back and make sure that you've answered it correctly. So it's beneficial for both you and the examiner. Now, my other top tips, it's so incredibly important that you read the question. A lot of students just skip over the question. They read it very, very quickly and they miss out on key information, especially when we get to the long questions in section B, and they can have lots of different parts to the question. If we think of, for example, the last couple of years in the textile question where they ask you to upcycle, a lot of the times they ask you to draw and sketch and label. Students don't read the question correctly and they won't end up doing one of those parts. So the best advice I can give you at junior cycle level, which will also go on to help you at Leaving Cert level in college, is to highlight or underline the key information found in your question. From this, you'll be able to identify exactly what the question is asking you, and you'll be able to identify action verbs. At this stage in your junior cycle, you should have heard of action verbs. So what these do is they allow you to determine how much information is needed in a question. And from that, you can then determine if it needs the SEE technique. So home ec is based on the SEE technique. So this stands for S for state, E for explain, and E for example. So I will show where these action verbs come from and which ones use the SEE technique in a sample answer to support you. So all exam questions have the action verb, and this is what's going to tell you, as I said before, how much detail is required. A lot of time when we correct assessments in class and when they're corrected at an SEC level, if you look at the comments from the chief examiners, they always state about the amount of detail that's required. So students generally don't give enough detail in their answers, and this is across all subjects. So these are the ones primarily found in short questions. Now, they can also be found in combination with your longer questions. So they're not just exclusively for section A of your paper. So these are generally your short answer ones. They're usually like bullet points. So the most common ones found, if you go back through your exam papers, are state, list, give an example, identify, indicate, name, and recommend. Now, as I said there, it's not an exhaustive list. What this means is that there are many more, but these are the most common ones. So if you come across a question which uses these action verbs, this means you're going to give a short and sweet answer. In comparison to these ones. So these ones are generally found in your longer questions. However, they have been creeping up as part of your section A. And this is where they're looking for a lot more detail. So students are of the view that section A is just very short, sweet, one-word answers. However, sometimes they can use action verbs like these where they're looking for more detail. So when you're using these, you're looking to explain why you have given your answer. So if an action verb includes describe, or explain, or justify, or evaluate, or critique, or discuss, or design, which can be known as construct, or distinguish, or compare, or differentiate, this means they're looking for you to use the SEE technique. So state, explain, and example. And if you do not state, explain, example for these particular action verbs in a question, you will only get half marks. And we want you to be able to get the full marks possible in your exam. Now, again, this is not an exhaustive list. There are more. So reminding you again, SEE, state, explain, example. So it is incredibly important that you learn off this acronym. This is where students fall down in exams by not giving enough detail. Now, most importantly, you'll hear this from all your teachers across all subjects. Please attempt all questions. A guess could be correct, especially multiple choice. There's nothing more a teacher hates is when multiple choice questions are left blank, because you generally have the 50% chance of getting it right. Now, these are probable topics for June 2025. Now, these are the most commonly found in all past exam questions, and unfortunately, we cannot guarantee that these are going to come up, but based on analysis of all the past exam questions and the sample papers, these are the ones which come up as trending and come up the most. So your macronutrients, you'll know that your macro and micronutrients are the foundations of home ec. So macronutrients, you're looking at your proteins, fats also known as lipids, and your carbohydrates. Micronutrients, you're looking at vitamins, minerals, and water. So your macro and micronutrients can come up as a question by themselves or in combination as part of a question. The food pyramid, menus have come up the last 3 years. Meal planning guidelines, these are directly linked with your menus. Diet through the life cycle, so you could be asked to plan a menu for a specific diet. So it could be, for example, the elderly, it could be a teenager. You could also be looking at, for example, a special diet like diabetes, it could be cardiovascular disease, it could be celiac disease. Food commodities. So these have not come up yet as part of a full question, and therefore it's highly probable that they could come up this year. They are all of the different foods which are found in the food pyramids. If you think of like your fruit, veg, and salads, your cereals, your dairy section, your meat, your eggs, your fats, all of those are known as food commodities. The consumer and the laws. Textile quality mark symbols. Upcycling a textile item, that's come up the last 3 years. And also the likes of machine and hand sewing stitches. A lot of students generally forget to revise these because they think because they're done within their CBA 1 that they don't have to study them again. This is why they tend to come up in exam questions. So these are the common topics that have come up in the last 3 years. Again, nothing is guaranteed, but these are the ones that have come up, except for food commodities, which has not come up this as of yet. So therefore, it is probable that it might make an appearance in this year's exam. Now, use this code here, 2025 tips, to get yourself 10% off a package at ExamRevision.ie, and I'm going to show you what exactly that means. Now this here, before I get on to that, is a sample exam question. So you can see how I've highlighted the key information. So there's a lot of information there. Sometimes it's a bit of information overload, especially when you're stressed and you're trying to get through an exam. So this is why it's so important to highlight the key information. And from there, you'll be able to find out what exactly your action verb is. So in this case, it's design, healthy balance for a 3-course breakfast. So this shows you a sample answer of how to answer a menu. Menus have come up every year for the last 3 years, and they're also in the sample papers, so it is definitely something worth knowing. Also, linking back then your meal planning guidelines, these should always link back to the particular menu that you've just answered. So here's a sample answer here. In this case, again, you're using the SEE, you're stating, you're explaining, you're giving examples. So meal planning guidelines is something that you should be learning off. So here's a quick tour of our complete revision package. So don't forget, this is our code this year, so 2025 tips, and this gives you 10% off a package. So there's hundreds of videos, which makes it really easy for students to be able to revise. You can get them 24/7, which is fantastic. They're bite-sized, so they're not super long. You get PowerPoint presentations, H1/distinction notes, exam and mock paper questions, which at this time of the year is super important to keep redoing them. They all include the marking scheme, so you can correct it yourself, quizzes, reflection logs. Our junior cycle subjects include Irish, English, Maths, History, Science, Geography, Business and Home Ec. These are our incoming ones in the new academic year, so French, Spanish and Religion, and you can get 10% off any of these packages here. Now, thinking further on to your Leaving Cert, these are all our subjects that we have, so these might be beneficial to you in the coming few years. And within our website, for each topic, we have our PowerPoints, we have our videos, we have our quizzes. The quizzes are really handy because they self-correct and you can attempt them as many times as you want, which kind of makes it a bit fun. So here are some of our student reviews. Lots of reviews on Google, so take a look, and don't forget, this is our 2025 tips, is our 10% off a package. I wish you the very best of luck with your junior cycle home economics written exam.